This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. Most any contemporary musical style can trace its roots back to the blues. Time Signatures explores the blues and its musical connections with captivating interviews, lively discussions, and news from the world of the blues.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me once again here on Time Signatures. I am your host, Jim Ervin, and we are pleased once again to welcome Gideon King of Gideon King and City Blog back to the show. This is part 2 of our conversation, and you can listen to previous episodes at lccconnect.org under the Time Signatures podcast webpage. One of the cool things that I was thinking about while you were talking about all of the older blues, Schofield and whatnot, are you aware that Fleetwood Mac was at one time a blues band?
Absolutely.
I was blown away. I think it was called Before the Beginning. It's a 3 CD set.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And
of course.
A friend of mine exposed me to Fleetwood Mac doing the blues, and I was just absolutely blown out of my socks.
Oh yeah, man. Of course. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like the blues is an overt thing, but it's also really hidden in everything. It really is, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of like, people might say like, Derek Trucks is a great blues guitarist. Okay. He's a great slide. I mean, or John Mayer, when he's doing his trio stuff, he's a decent blues guitarist, but you know what? Actually, so's Van Halen in his own way. He's drawing.
Sure.
In some ways, he's drawing from more sophisticated blues constructs than any of those guys. And so the fact that Fleetwood Mac drew from the blues or was actually a blues band, that makes, to be honest, and listening to their music, makes perfect sense. And don't think that Donald Fagen and Walter Becker from Steely Dan didn't draw a ton, frankly, from the blues. Almost any good musician is going to draw from the blues. How can you not? It's dominant chords, man. It's everything.
Oh yeah. Well, and as we say in the intro here, that, basically all genres of music have had some influence by the blues throughout history. Yeah. And, it makes me wonder what Fleetwood Mac could have been had they stayed in the genre as opposed to bringing on the girls and going to the pop side.
Yeah. Well,
but it's still a nice body of work,
Oh yeah. Hell yeah. You know what it is? The blues keeps people in a lane. Like look at Gary Clark Jr. Okay. There's a sort of modern day, blues guy, whether you like him or you don't like him, whatever. That's a matter of taste, I suppose. But like, he's a big name. Okay. But he's still considered in the blues lane. And that will limit someone, right? Like you're not going to be packing stadiums like Taylor Swift or U2 or Coldplay or whatever if you're in the blues lane. I'm not saying you can't get 3,500 people or 4,000 people or maybe even more in a room for a room cap, but it ain't going to be 59,000 people with their iPhones up like it is a Coldplay concert.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, because I have been talking to a lot of musicians in the blues, the blues lane, if you will.
Yeah.
And they go over to Europe because Europe has embraced the blues. They will pack stadiums. They will bring out 10, 20,000 people. A big group just went over to Romania. They went over Brazil. I think it's Brazil, Romania. The open
Romania, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're talking Toronto Cannon. We're talking.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that, because there are ways in which, and listen, I don't want to be one of these Europhiles that says America sucks and Europe's great. Like, that's boring. But like, by the same token, there are ways in which that Europeans are intellectually and artistically more open than we are. People watch more old movies in Europe. There's more attention paid to the craft of cooking in Europe in some ways. And they're very open to jazz. I mean, people love jazz in Spain and France and so on. And so it makes kind of weird, perfect cultural sense that the blues can have a bit of a more of a popular appeal in Europe, or let me put it this way, can scale up in Europe in a way that it can't scale up in the United States, because there's a certain artistic sensibility to the blues
Agreed.
that
Yes.
is it's like a very soulful, unique human thing. And listen, I mean, we're the Americans and they're the Europeans, and sometimes Europeans can be a little more human than we are in some ways. And listen, again, I'm not here to tell say Europe's they do this and that better and they're better than America. No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying there's a certain open architecture to their artistic sensibilities that makes what you're pointing out make at least perfect sense to me, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Well, and it's something that, as I've been diving deeper into doing the podcast and I talked to more people, we went to see Buddy Guy a few weeks ago over in Grand Rapids. And
Cool.
he was talking about the history of the blues and how Jimi Hendrix was big into the blues, but he couldn't break out in the United States. So he went over to Europe.
Totally.
And
by the way, same with some guys in jazz. Look at Dexter Gordon.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that had to do with racism, because there was plenty of racism in Europe too. But you're absolutely right. Some of those types of things. I mean, listen, where did Louis Armstrong make all his money? Okay,
Yeah.
Europe. So
Yeah.
like that's where the guy became the equivalent of loaded as hell. He made that money in Europe more than he made in the United States.
And you hear that story over and over and over again.
Yeah, and Charlie Parker in some respects, and Dexter Gordon, and dude, I mean, we can go on forever. And so there is something to be said. On the other hand, Jim, there are elements of the blues that are so uniquely American. Let's forget about Jimmy and Stevie Ray.
Sure.
Let's just talk about a guy like Skip James. Remember Skip James?
Yep. Oh yeah.
So Skip James was great playing that sort of janky guitar. He sounded great, good feel. And so like that's a unique, he almost wrote protest songs or songs that reflected his position of being oppressed. And so that is a uniquely American element to the blues, which I love, which is cool as hell and beautiful. So, but you're so right. It's funny. I wasn't thinking we would talk about this on the podcast, but you're right. These types of things are more accepted in Europe in some respects than they are in you know what? Even in terms of people's sense of humor, like in some ways, like Americans have lost their sense of humor. Like you go to Europe and, you can still laugh and make kind of inappropriate jokes. You can actually have a little fun. You know what I mean? And so it's like, maybe it's all part of a more kind of a more open architecture, like I was saying before, of speaking and creating. I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is.
It's something else, I'll tell you. And, and as I said, as I dive more into this and I get deeper into it, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I wish the blues had a better following here in the United States, because I would be at more shows. I mean, I just went down and got to see Thornetta Davis, who just won a blues award.
Oh yeah,
for the Female Soul Award winner of the year. Just incredible. And I got to see Toronzo Cannon and Joanna Connor this year. I mean, it's a big deal. But now let's look at the other side of this. I am going to see somebody who is not in that blues lane. He does do blues the traditional way, but he also does like a blues rock, and that's Joe Bonamassa. And
and he's a great shredder. And he's a bit of a modern day example of keeping the blues alive with a little bit more of an open architecture, right? It's not Albert King,
right?
It's not Robert Johnson, or it's not Rory Gallagher. It's a more modern day shredder's version of it that has elements of even Van Halen or whatever. But yes, he's important because he keeps. Who's damn good? While we're just sort of
go ahead.
Blue sky. You know who's really good? Eric Gales. You familiar with him, right?
Oh God, yes. I love Eric Gales.
Yeah, and he's a good modern day player because he's exploring things a little bit more harmonically, and he's a cool player. Yes, there are these modern day things, but here's the thing, whether we like it or not, when we talk about Gary Clark Jr. or we talk about Eric Gales, it's still in that, or even Christone, what's his name? Christone Ingram, that guy.
Kingfish,
he's good. Kingfish, yeah, right. They're still like, oh, those are the blues guys, meaning they're weirdly delineated.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's weird, and I just totally sure why. But it's a little bit of a shame. Then there's the ones that cross over, like Warren Haynes and Government Mule, that are somewhere between the blues and the Allman Brothers, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. You are listening to Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. My guest today is Gideon King. Gideon is out of New York City and very well known over there with City Blog, a band that he organized in 2015. If you haven't had a chance to check out his music, I would strongly recommend you do a search for him on Spotify. I gotta drag you back here for just a minute, and I want to talk about your creative process. Describe your process for writing music. Which comes first? Is it the lyrics, the music? What is it? How does it work?
It just depends. It's got to be a spark. When it's lyrics, it's like some strange thing. An example, my wife and I were talking the other day, which shouldn't surprise anybody because we're married, I guess. And we were talking the other day, and she used the expression throwing shade. And I thought that was like such a slick expression. It just the way it's throwing shade, like it just sounded cool, and almost like the word like stylus back when people had record players, and so that was just a spark. I started thinking, wow, that sounds slick, and then I started thinking about like relationships and people that need people to be their boyfriend or girlfriend so that they can put them down. And so like I started thinking about all the strange forms of throwing shade. And so I wrote a song. So that was a lyrical spark. And frankly, it's really, I think it's a really cool, almost pop song. You haven't heard it just because it hasn't been released and it wasn't on the EP, but it's in the, I don't know what you want to call it, back catalog. I don't know what, it's unreleased. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But then on the flip side, I have a new tune I'm working on, and it's about tattoos and people, how tattoos have become so common, and like, is it even rebellious to have a tattoo anymore? It might even be like reverse rebellious. It might even be conformist to have a tattoo now. And so I don't really care what the answer is, but it was something interesting to write about and think about. So that's a concept. But in this case, it's all starting from the harmonic stuff. There's some interesting little devices that you can play over dominant chords where you're arpeggiating certain chords within dominant chord scales. And so I came up with a few sort of fun little harmonic kind of devices and weird things. And that's mushrooming into like a big chordal structure, which is pretty complex. And that's a case where I will fit lyrics to the chordal structure. Okay. In the other case, this concept of throwing shade was, okay, the lyric thing was the spark, the word throwing shade, the phrase throwing shade, and let me just write a simple tune around that. And so it just depends where the spark comes from. It's always more complex, maybe less commercial, when the spark comes from a musical place. And when it comes from a lyrical place, it's usually a little more commercial. But that's the process. And then I come up with the chords and the lyrics and bring it to my band, and they do surgery on it, grooves, and they say, well, Gideon, this part sucks. What about doing this? And this part's great. Let's keep that and do more of it. Or we like it the way it is. And I just sort of like throw the piñata up to the band. They just start beating it up, and then we start recording and start putting it together. And then sometimes, of course, I call my piano player up and I just say like, hey man, I'm just sitting here watching the Yankee game, and I just can't think of anything creative. Can you write some chords and I'll come up with some lyrics? And we do that sometimes. And if I'm feeling like I can't quite get it done, like I can't get it all done, and I just say like, man, write. And he's great. He's a genius. So he'll bang out chords and I'll write lyrics to it. Maybe I'll add to the chords, and so it all starts with these sparks, I suppose, like everybody else. And then we go into the studio and we just start doing surgery on the idea. And rarely does the patient come out looking like it did when it started surgery, meaning just to extend that analogy, like a lot of stuff, once it goes through the filters of all these people's musical minds, it invariably comes out with something different, unless I'm super like, wedded to one idea. But I find in general, the more wedded to anything I am, the more the product sucks. So I've tried to outgrow that.
Well, and those creative parties that you referred to where you're doing surgery on the song have to be a good time for everybody, and it gives them a little bit of a chance to have a bit of input in what you're doing as well, yes?
Oh, hell yeah. First of all, yes, yes, and yes. And on top of that, and on top of that, in many ways, they're far better musicians than I am. So for me not to take their input, um, would be kind of stupid.
Very good. Hey, I'm going to have some fun with a couple of questions here now. I'd like to ask you if you had an all-time favorite song growing up. I remember when I was a kid, I had a little record player, and there were particular songs that I would just play over and over and over again. Did you have anything like that growing up? Is there one that sticks in your mind?
Yes, I got about 4 or 5. Can I rattle them off?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. All right. Old Man by Neil Young.
Oh yeah, good song. Yeah.
Oh man, I could name 10 Jimmy songs, but probably Foxy Lady.
Okay.
And Kid Charlemagne by Steely Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of my favorite. When We Were Young, of course, that was written more recently by Adele, which is a ridiculous song. And then the live version of Black Queen. Speaking of blues, by the way, Stephen Stills. I don't know if man, for anybody who's listening to this podcast, go on Spotify and check out Black Queen by the live version by Stephen Stills. He nails it. I mean, he's just killing it on guitar. That's worth listening to. Texas Flood, of course.
Oh yeah.
And I hate to be unoriginal, I really do, but Hotel California and Lion Eyes.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I hate to be unoriginal and say Hotel California, and then of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't include, a few Leonard Skinner songs. I mean, damn. I mean, those guys they were great guitarists and they were good, really good parts. And then of course, putting all that aside, the entire album Still Lives Talking by Pat Metheny and the album Still Warm by John Scofield.
There you go.
Oh yeah, I mean, like some of the great greatest guitar, and then a lot of early jazz stuff, Wes Montgomery stuff. But yeah, man, I guess I didn't really answer the question. I fly.
No, you did all right. You did all right. Gave me some good answers.
Myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't control it.
So in your career, I would imagine you've probably shared the stage with some pretty cool musicians along the way. Any names you'd like to share? Any big names?
I mean, I've definitely in the recording studio. John Scofield, Mark Broussard, James Genus, bass player for Daft Punk, Herbie Hancock, Gregoire Marouet, Donnie McCaslin, sax guy for David Bowie. Oh, dude, so many. I mean, just so many. Nate Smith on drums. Oh God, I can't even. Just so many great musicians.
So you had studio time with Bowie?
No, I wish.
Oh, okay.
Bowie saxophone player Donnie McCaslin.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, the name caught me, and I said I got to ask.
No. Yeah, I wish that were the case, but it's definitely not. But yeah, so many. So many great musicians and so many great singers for sure.
Absolutely. I have to ask: have you ever had a chance to meet your idol?
Well, I got about 8 of them. So John Scofield's probably my favorite guitar player, and he turned out we became great friends and released music together. And I don't think I have face to face ever met Donald Fagen from Steely Dan.
Okay.
And I'm positive I haven't met Jimi Hendrix. And that's for sure. And I haven't met Mahler, and I haven't met Snoop Dogg or Tupac. And I haven't met Ella Fitzgerald. Definitely
got some big names there.
Yeah, I've definitely met Pat Metheny for sure at the Blue Note, where I've played, in New York, and of course Go. So I've met a few of my idols for sure. Yeah, definitely for sure. But no, and Neil, I don't think I've ever met Neil Young. Mm-mm.
No, that would be cool. That would absolutely be cool.
Oh yeah, Neil is cool. Great songs.
You are listening to Time Signatures. I'm Jim Ervin, and my guest is Gideon King. We have covered so much ground here, and there's probably more to cover. I have to ask as we come to the close here, I'd like to know what's in the future. I know you've said you've got a body of work that has yet to be released. Any other big musical projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I sort of have like what I think is a simple answer to this question. I just want to expand our footprint the way we've been expanding, and I want to continue to have more people listen to our music, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Music. And I want to continue to improve upon and build out a huge catalog of music, which a growing number of people listen to, and continue to build out a really impactful live act. By the way, that's the thing I've learned most from the other musicians in the band, is how to take a song. There's a song in the studio, and then there's a song live, and impact and creating impact is a totally different process for each thing. So continue to be able to play. You know, we just got invited to play a festival in a number of weeks, and that'll be fun.
Very cool.
And you know, we'll continue to gig and play. So expand the footprint, expand the catalog. I have no idea how big we'll get. I have no idea how popular we'll get. But as long as, when all is said and done, you can sit there with some headphones on and listen to 4 hours of our music on Spotify, and have your interest piqued and your creativity or your inspiration jogged or whatever, then that is success for us. We have a bit of a following, and we do play gigs in front of people, but you know, geez, I'd like it to be more people. I'm not.
Well,
I'm
absolutely.
Not too proud to say that.
And I'd love to see you come to Michigan sometime, or maybe I'll get out there.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely invited. Yeah, the odds are we will end up playing in Michigan someday. So yeah. I appreciate all the questions.
Well, I appreciate your time today, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you going forward. My guest today has been Gideon King. Gideon, tell everybody where we can find you. Let's talk about your social media presence. You got a website.
Sure. Yeah.
Get it all out there.
Yeah. Gideon King and City blog. We have a website, of course. And then, of course, just go to Gideon King City blog on Instagram. I'm not the best social media guy in the world. We do have our Instagram and our threads, and I think Twitter and all that stuff that our manager manages. But you know what? If you'd go to Spotify, if any fan listening to this show or any listener listening to this show will go to Spotify and check out our music, that's all we can ask. And for that, we would be greatly appreciative. And if you ever come to one of our shows, well, we're even more appreciative. So that's how you can find us. I suppose, like you can find every other musician in the world.
Well, and you know, the one thing I do want to say, and I'm not saying this just because you're on the program as a guest, but I do spend the time and I do my homework and I do enjoy your music. If you get a chance, definitely look them up on Spotify and let me know what you think, man. We take comments on our Facebook page. We also take email comments, which all of that information will be following here. But we want to thank you for being with us today, Gideon. It has been a pleasure. And we will be back with the next episode as quickly as we can. We are recording as many as we can and just trying to keep things moving along now that we're out of hiatus and moving along. So thanks for listening. We will look forward to seeing you soon.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm crying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.